Hello, authors. I'm Joanne Morrell, children's and young adult fiction writer and author of short non-fiction for authors. Thanks for joining me for the Hybrid Author podcast, sharing interviews from industry professionals to help you forge a career as a hybrid author, both independently and traditionally publishing your books. You can get the show notes for each episode and sign up for your free author pass over at the Hybrid Author website to discover your writing process, get tips on how to publish productively, and get comfortable promoting your books at www.hybridauthor.com.au. Let's crack on with the episode. Hello, authors, and welcome to March. I hope you're all well and being productive by writing up a storm or publishing your books or simply getting better at the craft of writing. So this week's episode, number 20, we made it to 20, is with the fabulous publishing team from Bad Apple Press, Samantha Miles and Sonya Danaher. So they talk about how they came to set up Bad Apple Press, which is a publisher of stunning Australian memoir stories from everyday people. They are a small publisher and such a fabulous team. It's such a great interview. They're determined to give us as readers great stories that entertain, inspire, educate, and always surprise. They believe that the creators, us, the wonderful authors, should benefit as much as possible from their stories, and so they offer a higher than industry standard royalty system. They believe in Australian publishing, and by offering authors the opportunity to be rewarded financially for their creative work, they hope to promote its longevity, diversity, and sustainability. So coming up in the interview, they talk about what online events publishers attend, what to miss, what's coming up in publishing in 2022, what kind of books that they have put out and what they look for in submissions, and just how they came to be in publishing. So in my author adventure update this week, if you listen to the last episode, episode 19, you would have heard my business goal of sorting both my short non-fiction books, freelance writing, quick tips for fast success, and author fears, how to overcome them, into ebook, print, and audiobook formats. And this goal's got to be achieved by the 31st of March, and we're now into March. But in between the day job, being a mum and a wife, and so far I haven't been able to make a start on that goal. And it's not that I haven't just bothered to do it. There's just been a lot of other things that have come up that have stopped me from being able to do this. So anyways, I know it will get done. It has to, because I'm accountable to my business consultant, Kate. Most likely it will get done in true Joanne fashion, which is always last minute. So, however, I have been productive conducting lots of podcast interviews for you with industry professionals, some organisations and authors, and I can't wait to share because it's been incredible. Let's crack on with the episode. Samantha Miles is the founder and publishing manager at Bad Apple Press. Samantha has worked in publishing as both an in-house editor and production manager, as well as a freelance editor for over 20 years. She has worked at Hodder Headline and Horwitz Martin. Both companies have been taken over and renamed, although probably nothing to do with her, as well as McGraw Hill and Finch Publishing, where she was publishing manager for 11 years. Samantha lives in semi-rural Sydney and owns 3 horses. She competes in the insanely expensive and competitive sport of dressage, which means she's permanently poor and covered in bits of hay, among other things. Her favorite thing in life is explaining to her husband why she needs to order more hay. And one of her favorite things is to read a good book. Sonya Danaher is the founder and marketing sales representative at Bad Apple Press. Sonya has worked across many industries in her role as a multimedia designer and developer. After living some years in Amsterdam, where she worked for Logica Consulting as their pan-European graphics manager, she returned home for the sake of her liver with a love of chocolate sprinkles on bread, hagelslag, and realization of how far Australian businesses needed to catch up in the digital sphere.
Along with another returned expat, she began her own multimedia company, which operated successfully for 12 years. Sonya hates having her photo taken because for some reason, the result is always a surprise. She has had 2 children in what doctors like to call the geriatric years, and she only regrets one of them. Only joking, kids. Just keep guessing which one. Her favorite thing to do is wake up early when no one is around and sit on the veranda with a coffee and a good book. Wow, fantastic and hilarious bio, ladies. Welcome to the Hybrid Author Podcast.
Thanks for having us.
You're welcome. So, can you tell us a bit about how you came to be friends and in the publishing world and set up Bad Apple Press together?
Yes, I can give you my perspective, and then Sonya might be giving you a slightly different one. Essentially, we met firstly in year 7 at our local high school. Both of us were a little bit shell-shocked. Sonya had come from a very different environment, and I was never meant to go to that high school. I only found out a few days before. Anyway, nevertheless, we found each other, and we continued to be friends. Then I went off and got into editing, and Sonya went off and got into her design work and her fine arts degree. And then many years later, Sonya she had moved all over the world, and she came back and to Sydney because of her husband's work, and she got in touch and said, do you have any work? And I said, oh, well, I'm not sure. But anyway, it turned out we did have work, and Sonya came on board as a graphic designer.
Had you kept in touch that whole time when Sonya was traveling? Did you?
On
not
and
really?
off, probably more off. And then, yeah, so she worked with me for the last, was it 4 years, Sonya? 3 years at Finch?
4 years in the end, yeah. And the last year and a half, or maybe even 4.5 years, the last year back here in Perth.
So Sonya worked with me at Finch, and then our director at Finch Publishing decided to retire. And both Sonya and I thought some of the books that were on the list still deserved to be out and about. And we also thought, possibly quite naively, how hard could this be to set up our own publishing company? It didn't really matter, but it just added a slight level of complexity, but it actually hasn't really mattered at all. Sonya, her husband got sent back to Perth, or asked to go back to Perth. So Sonya's in Perth and I'm now in Sydney. And so we were well ahead of the remote working fad way before it actually happened. And so when people were scrambling around saying, well, how does Zoom work? We were like, oh, well, that's just how we work normally. So it really didn't impact us from that point of view. So that's my perspective of how it happened. I hope Sonya might have some slightly different opinion.
No, that's pretty much it. Yeah, we met in high school, and yeah, when I came back to Sydney, I had a 6-month-old baby, and I was about to lose my mind. And I thought, well, I wonder, and I never normally do this. I thought, oh, I'm just going to put it out there and see what happens. You know, I'm just going to text people I know and see if there's something they think I can help with. I was willing to volunteer at that stage, like for nothing. Just to leave the house, and then I met Rhett, who was a great character, and we got on really well, and I ended up working in the office with Rex, and Sam worked remotely. So, and as Manny says, sorry, I call Sam Manny. I've always known Sam as Manny from high school. So if I drift into that, that's who I'm talking about. Yeah, so we can thank Miss Jones, our English teacher, for our trajectory forward. If you're listening.
Yes, Miss Jones. We had her quite unusually. We had her for every year that we were in high school for English, which I don't think is normal.
No.
But yeah, and it was her first posting too. So we all grew up together, I think.
That's amazing. Oh, that's fantastic. And so Bad Apple Press, love the name, and I love the logo. Who came up with that? Or was it like a joint thing, or?
The logo was pretty much a joint thing. The name I'd always had kicking around in the back of my head for no reason that I can actually tell you. It just was there.
Yeah. So we officially launched, I suppose, in July 2019. And we had, as Sam says, we had a virtual launch before virtual launches were even a thing. We had a national launch with all of our authors all around Australia, and it was great. But then straight into COVID.
Yeah.
And can you tell us about the kind of books that you guys put out?
I guess I come from a trade publishing background generally, which means all books that you see in bookshops. I did work on educational books for a little while and some medical books, which was kind of gruesomely interesting. Basically, most of my publishing experience has been with trade. We're at Finch Publishing. Part of that range was we introduced memoir. And memoir, honestly, memoir was the closest thing I got to a narrative when I was working at Finch Publishing.
Right.
So I really, really pushed for it. And then we got some really interesting sales with memoir and some really interesting stories. And so we just decided more or less to really concentrate heavily on memoir. There's not a lot of publishing houses that cater for it other than the big celebrity memoirs or the sporting star memoirs or the political memoirs. There's no real publishing house that really specializes in I wouldn't say ordinary memoir, but it's from people who may not be so publicly well known, but they still have a very interesting and engrossing story. So we do a little bit of psychology as well, because we have an author, Andrew Fuller, who's one of Australia's leading adolescent psychologists. He's such a great character that he came on board with us, and so we do publish him as well. But essentially, it's any story that grabs our attention and that we personally would like to read ourselves. So that's the sort of book that we look for and do publish.
Yeah, fantastic. That's great. So as publishers, how do you keep up to date with what's happening in the industry? Like I as an author, I'm overwhelmed with the amount of stuff that's out there, and I can't imagine, how you guys stay on top of that, and how does that help you to determine book trends for the year? Is that something that publishers do? They kind of predict what's coming ahead, or you guys are already, sounds like you're already ahead of the game in the digital sphere of it?
Yeah, I guess we don't really particular trends for our list, although as Manny will probably tell you, trends do come through in manuscript submissions. Yeah, I mean, for us, it's obviously we're fully aware of what is going on around us in terms of politically, socially, and that always influences what comes out in general. More so for us, as Sam said, it's a good story. It has to be well written. And I think that's what always shines through. And authors should never forget that. Don't write on trend just for the sake of on trend. It's almost impossible to predict 2 years ahead, and you never know if you're even going to be published in that year when you thought it was on trend. So yeah, Sam probably has a bit more on that one.
Well, you can stay up to date to a certain point. We have access to industry newsletters, so we get to see what other publishing houses are publishing up to 6 months ahead. There's always a big roundup at the end of every year about publishers talking about what's coming out next year, so you get a bit of an idea. And then there's also the big days. I guess the closest thing we come to trends are the big selling days in book selling. Not so much now, but I guess they really used to be Mother's Day, Father's Day, coming up to Christmas. And this campaign, which is sort of petering out, New Year, New You. So in February, January, you get a lot of Get Fit, Lose Weight books. Mother's Day, you get a lot of books that people seem to think mothers would like. And that generally includes cooking books, gardening books, hobby books, sob story books. Father's Day is all about travel, adventure, sporting stars, your football, memoir, that kind of thing. And Christmas is just go for it. That's when publishers bring out their mega star books, the ones they really expect to sell well. An exception to that would be any of Harry Potter that just came out anytime and sold well anytime. But say you had a big book for Christmas. A recent example is the Lisa Wilkinson memoir. That was a perfect Christmas book. And the reason why is books are actually a popular gift at Christmas.
Yeah.
And so she's a well-known figure. She has an interesting story. She's got strongly opinionated on some certain topics. And so that was a perfect Christmas book. You could have bought that out at Mother's Day also. So I guess that's the closest relate to for trends. I mean, we may have a book.
Yeah. Ironically, for us as small publishing, we have to buck that trend in a way.
Yes.
Because
we don't do a Christmas book.
We can't compete with the influx of overseas books and large publishing houses books that are literally flooded. I think there was something like 360 new titles for the Christmas release last year. Yeah. And we couldn't possibly compete with that. So we buck the trends in a way. Yeah. It's why we can, because we're small and agile, I guess our little marketing tip for for our list is don't compete against Lisa Wilkins with someone who doesn't know with Go Blog.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's interesting for us. So we stay away from Christmas and definitely Mother's Day, and sometimes Father's Day. We've got a few books that would go well with Father's Day. It's not as big as Mother's Day, so you possibly stand your own ground there. But we really go for the months that don't have any particular holiday attached to them.
Maybe the months where
I hope that answers the question, but that's about
yeah. It's after those holidays and those people have got gift cards for books and they can come and find you guys. Yeah. Oh, great.
Yes, and interestingly, February is a month where booksellers seem to be screaming out for anything other than something to do with fitness and health and whatever. So they've all had all that big lead up to Christmas. Everyone's collapsed over January. You go back to work in February and they're screaming out for stuff. So as Sonya said, that's the trend. That's the system that booksellers follow. We don't follow that system for all the reasons that we've outlined. But I do, and as Sonya said, manuscripts, when they come in as submissions, we accept submissions from anywhere, whether they be, just random people or agents or whatever. For some bizarre reason, come in themes. So, I've had manuscript after manuscript after manuscript, all talking about boats and holidays around Australia. And then I've had misery memoirs, like sexual abuse and abuse by priests and things like that, which is, very sad. And it's actually quite hard to read manuscript after manuscript on those sorts of topics. And then, of course, if you publish a book on something, suddenly you get a lot of influx of submissions on that particular same topic as well.
Yeah.
So that's the sort of patterns that come through with manuscript submissions.
Would you take, because I've heard before, so say you took a submission from that pile of like a sexual abuse story or something, and then you get so many submissions in that. Is that your kind of door closed on that story because you've already got one in the pipes that you're putting out, or you do publish a few more in that?
It would depend on a couple of things. So our main criteria is that the story is well written and holds up by itself. It stands alone. If it was a good story and added to what we have already published, yes, we would definitely consider it. If that original book or the original topic sold extremely well, yes, we would consider it. We don't tend to take on any more psychology books, largely because we have Andrew Fuller, who covers all the sorts of topics, and we don't really want to compete with him. Like we would be competing with ourselves.
Yeah.
But that's not to say that we wouldn't publish something that would be complementary to what he's doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We wouldn't actively pit two books together, say on mothering in the same year, because the marketing just doesn't work for us to fight one off the other, and we normally have to pitch to booksellers or distributors pitch to booksellers with a unique perspective on that. So so for the most part, not to say that we wouldn't publish another book written about a mother-daughter relationship, for example, but it would probably not be in the same year.
Yeah, or it has to be complementary. If it was complementary to each other, would you pitch them together? Not necessarily.
That's a good question. I don't know. I think it would
not happen.
Manuscript. Sonya probably would say no straight away.
Right.
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah, because even still, I suppose if you're putting them out together, they, in some regards, they are still competing against each other for sales and things, So
it's more bookshelf space, to be honest. Like if we're trying to get them into booksellers, they won't they normally won't have two the same in a new thing from the same publisher sitting side by side in the same month.
Generally one or the other.
Yeah. Oh, fabulous. So you've touched on how you keep up to date in the industry. Just wondering if there is must-attend events, book events for publishers online or even in person if it's permitted with COVID these days, that is on your calendar that you definitely don't want to miss out on.
Okay, then sorry. The reason why I laugh at that is that I guess there are. Whether or not they're as vital as they used to be, I don't know, because I guess the independent bookseller conference is always something to take note of. But quite honestly, we're so small, whether we would attend or not would hardly make any difference to that. And quite frankly, we have tended to not be invited to those things. So we don't go. I have to say that when coming through publishing, my boss would always go to the Frankfurt Book Fair. Every year he'd go to Frankfurt, and every year he'd have to come back and spend 3 weeks in the chiropractor's chair because of the amount of standing he did and the long flights and everything. But Frankfurt Book Fair was a big deal for terms of selling your books to overseas agents. And so I've never been myself personally, and I know there's a Bologna Children's Fair, but a lot of these things, everything's sort of changed so much since all the COVID restrictions have come in. And I don't know if it's as crucial now to go in person, because people realize they can make connections and do deals and things remotely. So I'm not sure to answer your question on that. I don't know. Sonya, do you have any thoughts?
We have someone who works with us to present our books to overseas rights, etc. Mainly because we're too small. We couldn't actually spare the time to go. If we could fly to Frankfurt. But yeah, I think that's sort of the big one that's always been prevalent for publishers. The independent booksellers as well, we're always trying to get into. Yeah. But I think you're about right, man. It really, it's hard to know. And now we do a lot of virtual things online where, we get people. We pride ourselves on being small. I mean, that's our point. And so for that, we like to bring our readers directly to us, not necessarily through a bookseller in terms of creating a relationship. So we're willing to, put our authors out there. We have virtual stuff all the time where authors are talking to people. Andrew Fuller does webinars all the time, which are fantastic and get an amazing response. Yeah, so I think the world is changing. So we just sort of changing with it, I guess, or making it work for us, really.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's great. So how many books is it you publish a year, and in each category? Is it the same each year, or are you starting to put out more and more often, or is it how many from your is it existing authors on your list, or how many do you normally take as new submissions?
Oh, no. Okay, so I can answer that question, those two questions in the one answer.
Okay.
So we have between 6 to 7 books a year. Seems very small, but I can tell you that with only 2 people working on it, it's full on, because we handle everything ourselves. And those books will consist of possibly maybe 2 existing authors we've published before, and the rest will be new authors.
Yeah, okay, fantastic. So with the 2 of you, obviously Samantha, you're the editor.
Production, I can handle all the editorial and production, and Sonya handles all the marketing, promotion and accounts. Very important department.
Yeah. With your multimedia design, Sonya, do you have anything to do with the covers of the books and things like that?
Some I do. Some we outsource and some we insource. So it really just depends. We have some great cover designers, but I have done covers for us before. Yeah, so it just really depends on time. It's more of a time factor, or like anything else in the arts, there are certain people that suit certain styles. And so for some covers, we just think, she would be perfect, or they would be perfect to design that. Yeah, so all of those, I just take care of the boring back end stuff, and then and all of the
boring. It's incredibly vital to the ongoing business flow. But funnily enough, Sonya seems to take on the really hard covers, the covers that are really difficult that the other designers just don't seem to understand what to do with. And unfortunately, Sonya gets all the hard ones.
Like a challenge.
Necessity.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. So with these 6 or 7 books that you put out a year, what does your publishing schedule look like? Do you obviously, depending on what they're about, and you're slipping them in between the holidays, and how do you sit down at the end of the year or the start of the year and work out a publishing schedule in a year, or how does it?
Yes. So basically follow a system that I've always had, which is essentially you plot it out at the end of the year. or you start sort of around August preceding year, if not sooner. We get full very quickly, actually, because we only publish 6, so we try to publish one every 2 months. Sometimes we can't do that for timing reasons. It suits us and it suits the author, it benefits the author to do one every 2 months, because it gives you enough time to develop a really good publishing plan, promotional plan, and do marketing as well. It's very hard. And when we were working in a slightly bigger team, we had books coming out. We'd do 11, 12 books a year, sometimes 13. That churn factor is very hard for both the author and the staff. You really only get 3 or 4 weeks to work on an author, and then you've got to go on to the next one. And so you don't really develop the time. You don't have time to go back and reassess, or maybe try again if something hadn't worked in the first time. So that's one of the reasons we like to it's one of the benefits of being smaller and not having as many books, is that you can devote a bit more time to thinking about the promotion and working harder to get the books out there. We also don't want to have our books, we don't want to publish books that are going to sit on the shelf for 3 weeks and then the booksellers move them back, and then within 3 months they return them. We like to think that the books that we publish have a much longer life than that, and therefore it's up to us to make sure that the booksellers understand that life is longer than the traditional 3 months or 3 weeks on the shelf. So that's why we don't publish as many books. Also, physically, there are only 2 of us. There are only so many hours in a day that you can actually do it. And book publishing is very labour and time intensive.
Yeah, I mean, we have titles from 2019 or before that we still promote. So we don't believe in the 3-month you're out scenario. We develop long-term relationships with authors. We're always looking at ways to promote your book. If we think there's something that we can get you in on, or that you're appropriate for, or, we do everything from poster drops around all the capital cities to, you name it, we'll try it as a way of getting your book into people's faces, basically.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. And so to answer your original question, do try to start. We plotted out starting from August. Quite often you only might have the first half of the year or filled, if that's a word. And then the rest sort of comes. And there are periods where you just think, oh my God, I'm not gonna fill this calendar. We're just not gonna have any books. And then all of a sudden there's one that comes in. And we have had some that we could slot in. But again, this is a problem that we have to make sure we can't just slot one in and say we're going to publish this in 2 months. While physically you could actually do that, you could actually get the book edited and a cover designed and almost printed in within that 2 months. Our sales team, our distributor, they work 4 months ahead. And so if you miss that 4-month schedule, it's very hard for them to go back to booksellers and say, oh, by the way, there's this one. So we have to keep that in mind. So sometimes if we get a book in August, but the August sell-in has already happened, we will have to say, sorry, your book cannot be published this year. It has to go to next year. Otherwise, it's going to miss out on that sales cycle. And unfortunately, sales cycles are really, really important in book selling. It's incredibly boring and I hate them, but they're part of how the book gets out there.
Which is why we have to establish the list, normally by June, August the year before. Otherwise, we've missed the boat.
Yeah. Oh, wow. And so what kind of books can we expect from Bad Apple in 2022 this year? Are you allowed to disclose, or is it a secret?
Yeah, no, we're excited.
Actually, we do have some really good, I shouldn't say actually, we do have some.
I was going to say, we always have some really good books.
We do actually always, we always think this list is really good, and then we get a list for next year and we think, wow, this is actually even better. We have a mixture this year. We've got a few books that didn't get the exposure they needed to get because of COVID last year. So we put them back on the list for this year. But we've got 4 brand new books, one from an existing author and 3 from new authors. So we're really happy. They're memoirs. They're one about motherhood and child protection. There's one about a musical theatre actress who tried to make it in New York and married a chef, came back to Sydney and opened a one-hatted restaurant and had some kids and then had to go and live in Fiji. And her life is insane and very funny. And we have another author, Georgie Brooks, who wrote A Year in the Mud and the Teas and the Toast.
Oh, wow.
Or the Toast and the Tea, I think. Yes, about her move to the country and how confident she and her husband were about being country farmers, and then that went so well. Not she had to take on a job as a secondary high school teacher, and then her second book is called Semi-Educated, and that's about her life as a teacher, which she writes in a very dry, humorous, kind of gentle, funny way. Have I missed anything?
You've missed Anne's, which is
Anne, of course. Why don't you talk about Anne?
All That I Forgot, which is an extraordinary story about a woman who wakes up after being hospitalized and has no memory, has amnesia.
Wow.
The last 4 years.
Yeah.
This is memoir.
And the last 2 years never come back to her. And what she discovers is that what people have been telling her isn't actually necessarily the case.
People have been trying to help her regain her memory, and then suddenly she realizes, but maybe they've got their own agenda.
There's a lot of ulterior motives in this book, and it's quite I really enjoyed it. I woke up every morning to finish the manuscript because I just wanted to say what happened. This is a case of truth is stranger than fiction, because I do not think you could believe this if it was pitched as a movie. So it should be really interesting to see that. And that one's called All I Forgot, and Renee's is called Unraveling Us.
Unraveling Us. Yeah, Renee actually had a best-selling memoir called The House of Lies. And then this is her follow-up to that, because she got so many questions about what happened then. And it's actually what happens when you write a tell-all memoir that sells really well. What happens to your family after that? So many things happen to her family after she writes that memoir, which is really interesting because you don't often get to hear what happens after something like that.
So you've mentioned what would grab you in a submission is, a good story. Is there anything else you look for, like high quality writing, or just like something different? Or what advice do you have to authors who do submit to you?
Well, I'll go first because mine's different. So obviously excellent writing is obviously a bonus all round, let's face it. We also look for an author who is quite willing to take the book past publication. So there's a lot, most authors think that they've done all the hard work in getting there, which is true, and then it's even harder to get it published, and we also understand that. And now the real work begins when we have to get you out there, especially an unknown author. I need to have a chat, and we always have a pre-author call to make sure that everybody is prepared for what might come in terms of getting out there and putting yourself into the public sphere, which we all know is not necessarily a natural thing to do. I mean, especially if you're over the age of, a certain age, social media hasn't been in your life, taking photos of your everyday everything. It's not necessarily the first thing that comes to mind. So we're more than happy to guide you. We spend a lot of time working with you. I provide all of the content that you might need, but eventually it comes down to you have to be an author who is willing to put yourself out there, stand behind your work and talk about it, to people like you, or to the radio or to TV, or write about it if you need to. Go into bookstores, sign some copies, even if there's only 2 people, it doesn't matter. Every tiny little bit counts. And the notion that you can sit in your room, write a book, send it off, get it published, and that's all you need to do is long gone.
Yep.
Yeah. That is, and I have to add to that is incredibly long gone. Even if you self-publish, the amount of marketing that you'd have to do, and by self-publishing I mean you make it an ebook and you put it on Amazon, unless you're just happy for it to sit there and people to find it organically, that doesn't happen unless you actually push people towards that book. There are so many self-published books out there, so that marketing is really important. the story obviously has to be something that you've got to go a lot by gut instinct. And if it holds our interest, then you can almost say with some certainty it's going to hold other people's interest.
Yep.
And I've found that when I have been editing, the best test for me is, as I'm editing, I will stop editing and just keep reading without worrying about editing, just to see what would happen, which is actually a good example of what happened with Renee's book, Unraveling Us, is that it got so to the point where I actually just had to stop and read it. I don't like doing that because you don't come to the manuscript as an editor with fresh eyes, but nevertheless, I couldn't help myself. I just had to keep reading to find out what happened. Yeah. And so that was good. And that's a good indication. But it's two pronged. It's got to be, the writing has got to be of such a standard that it can either be easily improved or it stands on its own. And two, the author has to be of a nature in which they're willing to view this work as a bit of a collaboration with us, and they're going to do their part by getting out there and promoting it. And it's really unfortunate. I feel very sorry for authors that they have to do that, because I myself would hate it, but it is unfortunately part and parcel of it.
I think the more you do something as well, the more it gets easier, I suppose. And by putting yourself out there, you might discover that you like something, and you're better at doing social media than maybe in person. But you might kind of enjoy it, especially if you're out there talking about your work.
Yeah, I mean, we always guide the authors.
Yeah, I think that's great.
We're not going to put you in a position which makes you incredibly uncomfortable.
Yeah,
that's not our job. But we just need to know that you're as committed to getting the second half out there, getting the book out there, as we are, and that's really important to us.
Yeah, that was going to be my question as well, whether the story was kind of grabbing you, but the writing wasn't really hitting the mark, like whether you would...
Well, we've done that. We've had that. We've had that.
In saying that, we also can tell whether this is the first draft that you've sent us or the second draft. We should really only be saying the 10th draft or the 20th draft, like, quite seriously.
100th draft.
You need to get somebody else to read it first.
At least. And I have to, it's been said before, but I've heard other people say it, but it's true. The best manuscripts are the ones that have either the authors have gone to the trouble of attending a writer's workshop or a series of workshops, or they've had a freelance editor look at it first. They've had some sort of professional guidance.
Mm-hmm.
Those manuscripts really stand out.
Yeah. And what about the other way around? Like, the writing's kind of up there, but the story kind of hits the mark. Do you work with authors to... If you see a way that it could be made better, do you make hints and then tell them to go away and make the things before submitting again?
Yes.
You've done that before?
Or it can be written again.
Yeah. As another draft.
It could have some extremely heavy editorial input.
Yeah. Fantastic. No, that's great. So what's quite off-putting for a manuscript? Do you notice the same mistakes being made quite often by authors? Are you able to share?
If it's, especially in our genre, like in memoir, so if it's too raw, if it's too close, the author hasn't had enough distance from the event that they're writing about. We always talk about writing from a scar and not an open wound, because it's uncomfortable. It would make it exceedingly difficult to edit. It makes it exceedingly difficult to work with an author. I mean, you can just imagine how difficult it is to write about your family, for example, and then to be asked about it in television, on the radio. If you haven't let that go, it would be not only excruciating for yourself, but also for the audience, because we can read the emotion in that, So for me, that's really important.
True. I would go back to something quite basic, and is that you've got to pitch your manuscript to a publisher that actually publishes that sort of writing. So, for example, we have on occasion received submissions of poetry, children's books, cookbooks, and you can just tell the person, the author has not done the research as into which publisher might actually be suitable for my book. Yeah. That is really important. When somebody has written a letter, they've looked at your style, they think that your book might that their book might suit your list because you've done something in the same way. They've actually gone out and looked at bookshops and have seen what else is out there currently or what has done well in the past. They have a network of contacts that could possibly help in selling. Those things are really important. There's somebody who's gone to some effort to really present their work in the best possible way, following the submission guidelines that we set out on our website. Yeah, I guess that's what that's what would attract me to a manuscript, would attract me to actually look at it properly. That we make a big deal about we only publish authors who reside here in Australia. We do that for two reasons. One, we want to promote Australian writing, and two, it's incredibly difficult to try and promote an author when they're based in another country. We've done it. It's horrible. It doesn't work for us. And so if someone submits to us from Poland or the US or another country like that, it just means they haven't looked at what we do. Yeah, and it's a bit of a scattergun approach. They're obviously taking a bit of a scattergun approach to trying to get their manuscript out there. The other thing we do is memoir. Memoir doesn't mean biography. Memoir doesn't necessarily mean I was born on such and such date and my mother came from this part of the country and my father came from that. You know what? No one's interested in that except unless it's your family. So you've got to make sure that your story is something that you think would appeal to more than your mum or your dad or your 5 cousins. It's got to be something that has more, it's got to have general appeal. And there's got to be a reason why you're writing it. If you want to write it to be famous, that's not going to work.
Just on that, like writing for revenge as well, it's not revenge manuscripts are quite prominent. He did this to me and I'm going to, get back by expo. That's not really what we do. That sounds quite
juicy, actually. Revenge manuscripts.
If it's written well, perhaps, but there's a lot which is, basically I'm just going to tell you what a asshole this person was, and that's not really what we do either. So, I think like with anything else,
if you publish one of these revenge things, you'd probably cop a couple of lawsuits, maybe, possibly.
Yeah, like for example, we had. I don't know if I can say this. I'll say it. We had, you remember the book, obviously you might have heard of this book, Elizabeth, now I can't even remember the title. What is it? Sex, Lies, Food? What is it, that Elizabeth book? Elizabeth
Gilbert.
Yes, Elizabeth Gilbert.
Eat, Pray, Love.
Eat, Pray, Love. Yeah. God, I can't believe I've had a blank on that. Eat, Pray, Love. Yeah. Anyway, well, we were contacted by the person that she ended up with at the end of that book, his ex-wife, wanting to write her side of the story. And there were so many legal issues with that. And I actually, I don't think it would have been a promising manuscript from what I've seen, because it was, as Sonya has said, it was a revenge manuscript. And there was no real point to that other than her just feeling very bitter and upset. And all credit to her, she should have, from what the manuscript was saying, but it wouldn't have made for nice reading for anybody else. No. It wouldn't have helped anybody else.
Yeah. And that's the purpose, isn't it? Oh goodness! I was just going to say, what is the best and the hardest part of being a publisher? But maybe it's these stories.
That's a bit of both. We do get to meet a lot of interesting people with very interesting stories. That is really the highlight. If you're someone who loves books and loves stories, then getting a sneak peek into lots of people's lives is very interesting. For me, it's also like the collaborative nature of it. When you're writing or, coming from an arts background, sometimes you're creating a lot in isolation, and then to be able to come together and bring it to the light of day, to introduce your baby to the world, is a real collaborative process, and one that has its ups and downs, but it's definitely worth it. You always have a sense of pride at the end of it, and the author should, and so should we at the end of, because it's been a long, hard slog to get there. But and also for us as two women working together, we believe in what we do, and we believe in bringing a sense of diversity in terms of, you don't have to be a famous person to get your story out there, and you shouldn't have to. So we champion that, and that's the things that I enjoy.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'd have to agree with all of that. The launches, while they're very stressful, are also good. It's a bit like when you go to a wedding and you just feel like there's all the feel-good vibes at the wedding. And then it's a bit like that at the launch when you forget all the hard work and the pain that's gone into it, and you just see people celebrating a tangible object, a legacy that they've created. That's really great. And yes, as Sonya said, the collaborative effort, when something comes to fruition from just an idea to something tangible is really good.
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? Well, your passion shines through for what you do, so that's amazing. What are your thoughts on, because this is the Hybrid Author podcast, on self-publishing, and do you have any tips for authors who go down that route?
No, I have nothing to say, nothing bad to say about self-publishing. There are many reasons why people choose to self-publish. Publishing is pretty closed shop here in Australia. It's very categorized. When we sell our books in, we often have to say, this book is very similar to this other book, for them to get an idea of where they should put that book in the bookshop. The hardest book to sell is the book that doesn't fit any categories. It's got lots of things to talk about. It's a great book. It's got great writing, but it doesn't fit a particular category. That is really hard to sell to bookshops. And so when people are rejected from the bigger publishing companies or any publishing companies, it may not necessarily be that the writing is bad or the story is uninteresting. It may be that they just can't see a way to sell that book to anybody else. And so that's why some people tend to go to self-publishing. And what I said before is that I have no problem with self-publishing, but what people need to realize about self-publishing is you also have a second job, and that's to sell the book. So you've got to write it, produce it in whatever way you can, and then you have to sell the book. If you want to make money off it.
Yeah. I think it's also worth noting that, that being a writer is also a career for people, not just something that they whip together. That you're talking 10 years, 20 years, people, there's very few sort of overnight successes. Me and Manny were just talking about this the other day. So self-publishing is great, but you need to be prepared for the long haul, and that even though it seems like social media will just, lift you up on its wings and all of a sudden you'll have 200,000 followers, those 200,000 followers in our experience won't necessarily be readers, and they won't necessarily buy your book. So I do think, to keep that in mind. We also talk about your definition of success. Is success for you getting a book finished? Is success for you getting a book published? Is success for you having one person read it? So I think that's really important to measure for yourself as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just true. And just pointing out to what Sonya said, what we were discussing was that there's an author out there now, well, it's Jane Harper, who is sort of touted as the author overnight success, 3 blockbuster sellers. But you know what? She's been writing before that for 20 years. She was a journalist. She had discipline. She knew her craft. She knew how to put words together. It's just that she'd gone off on a bit of a tangent, was doing a different style of writing. So it's very, very rare for a first-time author to put something down that they haven't written before and it turns out to be a bestseller and takes off. Look, it happens. It has happened. It's just not a common story.
It's rare, yeah.
I mean, even Bryce Courtenay, he spent years handing out bits of his, samples of his books at train stations. He really did. Yeah. Matthew Riley wore out the bottoms of his shoes selling his own books. He's somebody who's self-published originally his first book, and it was picked up by Pan Macker after that, and he's taken off there, but it's hard. I guess the big takeaway from book publishing that we've learned, and there's no way around it, it's a hard business. It's a hard business. The profit margins are small. People are fickle in their taste. Readers are fickle in their taste. It's a gamble. I mean, I would have people talk about my sport, dressage. You may as well just go out the back and dig a hole and put all your money in it, cover it up again. That's sometimes with publishing, it does feel like that. You put a lot of effort into a project and you do your best, and for whatever reason, it doesn't take off. It's a gamble.
Yeah. But when it does, as you spoke about before, it's incredible.
It is incredible.
Yeah.
It really is. It really is. And we probably should celebrate those small wins a little more than we do.
Yeah.
But we don't. We've got other things to do.
Yeah, that's it. Well, thank you so much, Sonya and Sam, for sharing your amazing publishing expertise and your time with us today and the Bad Apple Press story. Where can our listeners find your authors and your books online and in store?
You can find us at badapplepress.com.au, and books are available there or all around Australia in bookstores. And if you've got a book that you want to buy and it's not in your bookstore, just go and ask your local bookseller, because they're more than happy to order them in as well. So if you can't find it from us, or you'd rather support your local independent, and we completely understand that, then please just ask them and they can get in touch with us, or they'll get in touch with our distributor. Also, please note that though, if you do buy a book from us, you are guaranteeing the authors a higher royalty. We pay 25% royalty straight from our website sales. So yeah, you don't have to feel guilty about that. So you're actively supporting independent Australian publishing. And for that, as me and Manny say, we do a little happy dance and pop the books away for you, and it's all fantastic.
You get a lovely little bag. Book bag, and a parcel sent to you with the knowledge that you have furthered an author's career and also helped them a lot. So we love everybody who buys our books.
I love that. That's fantastic. That was a lovely touch as well. That's great. Well, thank you again, ladies. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
So there you have it, folks. The amazing team from Bad Apple Press. Lots of amazing publishing tips and information there from them. And obviously head on over to their links to check them out. So next week, episode number 21, is an interview with Lorraine Horsley. She writes stories for children and adults along with non-fiction. So we talk about her non-fiction publishing journey and many more things. So have a great week, and it's bye for now. That's the end for now, authors. I hope you're further forward in your author adventure after listening, and I hope you'll listen next time. Remember to head on over to the Hybrid Author website at www.hybridauthor.com.au to get your free author pass. It's bye for now.